Hi, and welcome to NatChat, the Natilik podcast. This week, we have a NatChat takeover for International Women's Week with myself, Hayley Knott, and my colleague, Emma Simpkin. Today, we're going to be talking with guests from Palo Alto Networks and Anglia Ruskin University around the cybersecurity skills gap and gender diversity in tech to see if two industry challenges could have one common solution. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you with us today. I think it'll be great if we could just go around and let the listeners know who we have with us today. So, Stuart, do you want to kick us off?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stuart Taylor, and I'm the Channel Director for Palo Alto Networks in the UK and Ireland. I've been with Palo Alto Networks for about 2.5 years and been in IT for over 20 years now.
Brilliant, thank you. And we have Joanne Smith with us today.
Yeah, I'm Jo. I work for Anglia Ruskin University and I am their Placements and Employer Engagement Manager.
And then Emma.
Hi everybody, so I'm Emma Simpkin. I'm one of our Service Design, Transition and Delivery Managers here at Natilik, and I'm attending today more in the role of a community leader alongside Hayley. So I work with Hayley in our Women in Tech community at Natilik. As it's International Women's Week, so Monday, March 8th would have marked International Women's Week by the time you're listening to this. We want to start a conversation around the technical skills gap, particularly in cybersecurity, and how gender diversity can be looked at from that perspective to start addressing and filling that skills gap by attracting more women and diverse kind of minorities into the community.
Actually, Emma, that might be a really good starting place if you'd like to give a little bit more of a context around the conversation we're going to go through today.
Yeah, absolutely. So our community at Natilik is really focused on 3 areas. So contributing to the industry-wide conversation around gender diversity or women in technology, acting as a trusted advisor to Natilik leadership, and then supporting a gender diverse future for tech. And I think when we talk around cybersecurity and the skills gap, lots of different organisations and even our own UK government have actually identified that there's a real opportunity here to look at kind of fixing 2 problems by attracting women into the industry. You may have noticed, and I think a lot of people will be, or at least have a periphery awareness of the cybersecurity skills gap from the Your Next Job Might Be in Cyber campaign last year. Unfortunately, that wasn't executed in the best way possible. It drew a lot of criticism as it featured a ballerina, Fatima, retraining to skill up in cyber, which at the time probably wasn't the most sensitive given the context and difficulties facing the arts and entertainment sectors as a result of the pandemic. However, the idea of that program, When Your Next Job Might Be in Cyber, being led by Cyber First and the National Cybersecurity Centre, was to encourage people from all different sectors to look at retraining and skilling up into cybersecurity to fill the cybersecurity skills gap. So I think that's a really interesting point, and lots of other companies, organisations, and even the government are kind of drawing the gaps and seeing that we might be able to do something here. So, Stuart, just to backtrack, I know lots of people might be aware of the cybersecurity and the technical skills gap, but what would you kind of classify that as, or how would you explain that to our listeners?
So there's been a large change or explosion in the need for cybersecurity within organisations. I think everyone, as our society has become more digitised, are aware of the dangers that exist potentially in exfiltration of people's data, personal information, etc., right down to domestically, not just as businesses. So I think there's an awareness that's been increased because of our digitisation of our lives. And equally, that's high on the agenda of businesses to make sure that they protect their customers and their staff as they operate out in their marketplaces. I think to quantify some of the skills gap pieces, if you look at some work that the government has done around that, approximately 48% of organisations have a basic skills gap in cybersecurity. And a quarter have a skills gap when it comes to incident response, for example. So it's well regarded and documented that there is a skills gap in cybersecurity. And as our lives become more digital, as organisations take advantage of newer technologies, as they need to introduce more remote working practices and flexible working to optimise their operations, there are more and more attack surfaces, more and more likelihoods of vulnerabilities, more and more opportunities for bad actors to take advantage of those vulnerabilities and exploit them for quite often criminal gains, right? So there is a need and an ever increasing and accelerating need for cybersecurity skills in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it really interesting. I know Hayley shared this previously when we were talking about getting set up for this podcast, but some of the government research into it in 2020 suggested that about 48% of businesses have a basic skills gap when it comes to cybersecurity. So the people operating those businesses either aren't outsourcing to a partner to get support or an external cybersecurity provider, or they don't have people internally, which is quite worrying when you've said and you've articulated it there that the availability of these attack surfaces is just constantly increasing as we live in the digital world more and more. I mean, we're obviously all having this conversation today virtually, and that is how you record a podcast, but pre-COVID, that wasn't the norm in terms of the most meetings. So it's really interesting looking at it from that context, that we have the increasing of the requirement for cybersecurities, but we don't seem to be addressing it from a skills gap perspective. So what are Palo Alto doing? I know that you've mentioned a few times that there's some interesting things going on in terms of how you're tackling the cybersecurity skills gap and asking your partners and the clients that you work with to do that.
I think there's two ways to do it. One is the human factor, and then the other is the technology factor. So we've got a challenge where we've got a gap in terms of individuals within the industry that we need to address, and particularly around this conversation, we've got a gender gap where we need to have more women into cybersecurity. I mean, generally, technology has a challenge with the proportion of women in it. Cybersecurity is probably even more pronounced than that, and perhaps we can discuss that and the reasons why in a bit. But ultimately, there's that human element that we need to address. But there's also an element that we can help with regards to technology, leveraging technology such as machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, to help drive automation within the platforms for cybersecurity that can do some of the routine, repeatable, more mundane tasks that currently cybersecurity analysts do now. And that will alleviate some of the challenges that are needed and enable those organizations to go more on the front foot with their cybersecurity skills to do things like threat hunting rather than do reactive tasks to remediate issues that take a long time to do and to identify and then to actually solve. So it's the two streams really. And for us, if we talk around the diversity piece and the women in cybersecurity section, we need to encourage women more so into those roles. So we've got a couple of areas that we look at as an organisation to do that, and it's probably into three kind of pillars really. One is addressing the workforce. How do we get more women into cybersecurity? And that involves education, and that's perhaps where Joe comes in as well to talk around how we do that. The second part is our own workplace. How do we make the workplace an attractive environment for women in cybersecurity, for everyone within the organisation to be their best self and to give them that opportunity? And then the third is out to our customers and the marketplace in terms of how we are open about the challenges that we face, how we as organisations can help each other encourage women into cybersecurity and help two things, increase our proportion of or the gender levels to become more matching, and then at the same time addressing the cyber skills gap in the marketplace as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I really like how you framed it in there's a people and a technology element to this, and even just like your wording around that, talking about if you're working in cybersecurity and just the bombardment of alerts that you'd get and how you can leverage technology to minimize that and then free up your time and your resources and your team to be able to do the more exciting and engaging, threat hunting side to that cybersecurity role. And I think it is very much so about how we position it and how we facilitate our teams with the right tools to be able to get the best out of their roles and the best out of them. And it's great to hear, obviously, you have that strategy and that approach of Palo with those pillars. And Joe, I think, looking when we're talking about entry levels and what universities can do, I saw a stat recently which said that only 3% of female A-level students would even consider a career in tech. And that is one of the barriers which we as people within the tech industry and the education establishments need to look at and address and see what we can do. I know we've spoken about different strategies like long-term, short-term. It'd be great to get your take on how things are changing and what barriers there are to address.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, STEM generally, unfortunately, the balance gender-wise has never been great, and I think cybersecurity is struggling at the moment because, as Stuart said, it's boomed so quickly, and whenever an industry grows as quickly as cybersecurity, unfortunately, has, in some respects, it's always difficult for universities and the pipeline of students coming in to catch up and balance that out. I think cybersecurity particularly struggles with the fact that it falls under sort of three titles. It's been badged as engineering, it's been badged under tech, and it's been badged under science. And all three of those are historically poor for gender diversity. So I don't think it's done very well in that respect. However, there is lots of work being done to try and rectify that and to try and balance it out in terms of students coming on course. So we've done quite a lot of work around our marketing to make sure that the figures that we use, the images that we use, are more balanced, that don't show your stereotypical cybersecurity working in a hoodie in a dark room, tapping away, but actually shows an industry that's more balanced and more diverse. We have looked at things like entry criteria. So it's something for employers to bear in mind in terms of their own job descriptions. Do we really need to be asking for 3 A-levels in science to do a cybersecurity course? Do we need our students to have an A-level in maths? It's about looking at what practical skills our students might need. We need entry requirements, they're part of a university course, but are we making those accessible for students, or are we putting up barriers unnecessarily? So those things are being done now to help students. Universities will always be a little bit behind in terms of course development, because as quickly as an industry needs a course, it will take a while for a university to be able to develop a course that's accredited and go through. ARU is quite lucky, it's got quite a large suite of cybersecurity and computing courses generally, and we are seeing the numbers increase. But on average, we're probably looking at about 10% of students being female on STEM-related courses and tech-related courses. So it would obviously be really good to see that increase. In terms of short-term and long-term strategies for employers, I think some of the things we've discussed previously are around looking at things like your job descriptions. Are they overly wordy? Are they full of acronyms? Are they actually phrased in a way that alienates women coming into the industry? So there's been some research done that by changing some of the wording in your job descriptions can actually make them much more appealing to women without alienating male applicants. So words such as strong, lead, analysis, manage, all turn women off of applications, but by using words like proven, grow, develop, values, doesn't alienate male applicants, but makes you far more likely to get female applicants. So simple things like that in terms of our university course descriptions and your job descriptions might help female applicants apply. I think longer term, the massive piece of work needs to be done around perception, because as we've said earlier, the idea that you might just be alert managing, or you might be working in this dark room in this hoodie in this kind of very isolated role is a long way off of what we all know that tech and cybersecurity is. So it would be good to see work done around that in terms of company websites, in terms of general marketing that goes out to students. And it needs to start earlier than the kind of oven-ready graduates, because by the time they get to graduation, they've normally sort of picked their career path. And cybersecurity, I mean, 3% of students considering that at A-level is quite disappointing.
Joe, I think that's really a really important point as well, actually, to start early. Two things that I'd pick up on what you just said is starting early in the perception piece. So starting early, I think you need to change it at school level. It's even before you get to university. And I think us as cybersecurity organisations and technology organisations ensuring that there's a comfort level, there's an understanding of exactly what a career looks in technology looks like for women, that isn't the perceived male dominated perception of the words that you just outlined, for sure. And then on the other hand, we've got a piece where for us, I don't think those words that you described actually aptly describe what the role entails when you come and do it on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I look at what a number of our customers do with their security staff. I look at what our partners do with their security staff. I look at we do with our security staff, both from an inward protection and also from helping customers and partners be able to build their cybersecurity postures. It's about designing, it's about helping the business operate securely moving forward, and making that business effective and successful. And it's less about those engineering nuts and bolts. So we as a industry have to make sure that we articulate accurately what we do, and that has changed, right? So and we have to change with it to make sure that we do attract those people and listen to people like yourselves in how we attract the more and more women into our businesses.
I agree. And I think the other thing to think about is we already know that there is going to be a very small pool right now of oven-ready kind of cybersecurity graduates that are available to go into the roles that you have immediately. So I think it's about thinking about outside the box and who else you could recruit. So the Institute of Student Employers says that somewhere around 80% of employers aren't concerned about the background that their students have graduated from, so are recruiting from a much wider base than those who are just looking for a tech graduate. So I would encourage employers to think about whether they actually need a cybersecurity graduate for these entry-level roles, or whether a business course that's heavily analytical, or an engineering course that's quite numerate, or even something like forensic science that produces quite data-driven, highly diagnostic candidates could actually be transferable into some of these roles that you might have. And whether you're leaving it too late to recruit. So again, there's some statistics around 44% of placement students go on to work for that organisation when they graduate. So are you waiting until students graduate to engage with talent? Or are you working with teams like ourselves to take on students in their first year for work experience or for a year-long placement? Because if you're only using kind of one entry point, which is to take on a cybersecurity graduate after 3 years of a course, I think you are going to find it hard to recruit anyone, let alone the kind of diversity that you might be looking for as a business. So I think it's about changing the perception of what we class as our industry and how we market it, but for organisations to also look at diversifying their own recruitment methods to try and broaden and diversify their workforce.
I think that's really interesting. I was just going to add on to those 2 points that you've said there, Joe, because there's a 2018 labour market study done again by the government that was establishing that it's actually quite rare for those who are performing cyber functions in firms outside of the cybersecurity sector to have relevant qualifications or accreditations, and that's what is making up part of that skills gap we're talking around. So just 4% of businesses have staff with relevant qualifications or accreditation, including anything in IT. And this was 32% amongst larger businesses. So when you look at it from context around the people who are doing the job today, it does seem that we have a obligation as the industry level to kind of help them all skill up to be able to fulfill those roles. And then on the perception piece, another note that I found really interesting, and I completely agree with you, Stuart, here, is that we almost seem to act as if sometimes cybersecurity and roles in security are not inherently altruistic, and I think that that's something we might miss when we're positioning it out to the wider market and looking at future candidates and also people of school age who are deciding on what they want their career to be. If you're talking around, looking at a career in cyber, or when you are helping an organisation with their security posturing, you're inherently doing something that is quite altruistic there. You're helping them save future jobs by not having to pay for fines to regulators for data breaches. You're ensuring that there's no layoffs as a result of that, as well as protecting IP. So it is really interesting how the perception of the industry and therefore the role sometimes can actually play a part and not really amplify what is actually being done and the incredible work that's being done by cybersecurity professionals today.
I agree, and I do think also there is a little bit of a responsibility on us, professionals within the tech industry, to make sure that we are articulating and verbalizing the positive career options and choices and roles that are out there. You and I am prone to it myself. When someone asks what do you do, you often either play it down or give a short summary statement. But actually, when we're talking to the next generation and we're looking to inspire them into tech roles, it's important to articulate the impact that it has and the creativity that comes with working in the tech industry and the flexibility and the absolute vast diversity of opportunities that are there. And I think, like you say, it does need to come at a school level as well, whether that be us committing to going and talking at career days, or making sure that we put forward you know, a diverse representation of our business out there. It is important to make sure that we're communicating what the tech industry and the cyber element of that has to offer.
I couldn't agree more. I have to say, we've seen firsthand that when employers bring employees with them that are more relatable to that particular demographic or that particular makeup of students, that it has a real impact on engagement. So if you're looking to diversify your workforce, be it gender, be it accessing more BAME candidates or whatever it might be, if you can bring role models that show that as a business you are actually practicing what you're preaching, it has a huge impact on engagement. And I think it's really easy to, and I think the role models at CEO level and things like that are absolutely fantastic and should be much better promoted. But actually, certainly for our students who are at the beginning of their career, that can be quite a long way off for them, and that can feel quite a sort of big jump to imagine themselves in those positions. But if you can bring along people that are, or use people in your marketing and on your websites that are sort of 3 to 5 years into their career, that's really quite aspirational for students, and also shows them where their career might go, where it could progress to, what's the next step after that entry level role. And that's really quite powerful. So I'd advocate that to any employer that's looking to diversify their workforce.
Definitely, that's something that we do within some of our networks within our business as well. And that's when we talk about outwardly trying to encourage in the workplace people to join the cybersecurity industry, and giving those positive role model examples. Definitely. I think one area we haven't really talked about at the moment is why women in cybersecurity is so important. We've kind of made an assumptive it's important, but I think
Correct.
there's a number of things to talk about there, and ultimately, we are missing as organisations, we're missing a talent pool by not attracting women in the right way into this industry, and by having that kind of archaic messaging, which isn't adapting to actually what the role is, and isn't appealing to individuals that may want that option or take up that option. And so we're missing that talent pool. We're missing the different perspectives that those different backgrounds, different thoughts bring. We're missing the enhanced collaboration that it's evidence that brings, and a number of other things. But ultimately, as organisations, we're also missing the performance level that brings, and the enhanced profitability that brings to companies as well. Which again is well researched and regarded. I think one stat I've got that. According to McKinsey, the most gender diverse companies are 21% more likely to experience above average profitability. It's very inherent on our organisations, if we want to be successful, to have a more diverse employment base.
Absolutely. And I think that was one thing that really struck me when looking at the 2018 labour market surveys in cybersecurity versus the 2020 one was that 29% of those same organisations which were surveyed in 2018 had made changes by 2020 to try and kind of implement ways of recruiting more women, because businesses are taking notice, as you've said, Stuart. They are seeing that there is a clear link between diversity and profitability, and they want to naturally make sure that they're on the movement towards that. Okay, so stepping back from it for a little bit there then, how do employees and organisations help? How do we implement this? And what are the key things we need to know and for our listeners to be aware of?
I think from my side of things, it's to review your current processes and to see whether you're doing things the way that you've always done them, just because it's the way you've always done them, or whether that's truly the best approach. So looking at your essential requirements, looking at how you recruit your students or your employees, and to see whether there's work you can be doing there. Look at whether you're working with the right partners. So shameless plug for ARU. We're not a Russell Group university, but we have a phenomenal diversity of students. We have something like 36% of our students classify as BAME, and 94% of our students fall under a widening participation criteria. So look at your universities that you're working with. Are you working with universities with the right courses for you? Are you working with universities that are recruiting the right type of students for what you're looking for? Do your job descriptions do you justice? Are they the ones you've used for the last 5 years and actually are quite boring? Could we make it a bit more interesting? And are you working with organisations like STEMettes or Young Engineers to try and impact the younger generation to be more engaged in tech? So for me, I suppose, take a step back, don't do what you've always done, see if there's work we can do to make it more appealing to, in this case, in this topic, women, but actually just a more diverse organisation and group of candidates.
I fully agree with what Jo said, and I'm very pleased that quite a lot of that we've done at Palo Alto Networks. But I think what's really important for organisations and for the organisation I work for and represent as well is to be honest about where you are, right? And once you're honest about where you are, you can understand exactly what you need to do to make those changes, and implement some of those things. And I'm pleased to say that one of the things that we do as an organisation is be honest openly as well. It's not just honest within our own company and not sharing that outside. We publish what our gender diversity figures are. We want to show that we have a situation that we need to improve upon and the steps that we're looking to make to improve upon them. And we want to collaborate with other organisations that are like-minded to make those changes. And I think that that's really important, that we collaborate with other organisations to make sure that we're all open and honest about where we need to be, that we share best practices about how to improve the situation, and we can learn from one another. Whether we're competitive or not in the market, we learn from one another how to improve our situation as an industry.
Agreed. That industry-wide conversation cannot be valued enough in tackling both the cybersecurity skills gap, but also attracting more women into the technology industry and cyber as a kind of a subsector within that.
Definitely. And I think the conversation we've had today will be mirrored across lots of different organisations, hopefully, and will spark people to ask themselves some questions. And like you say, Stuart, we do need to hold ourselves accountable of what we can do at a personal level, at an organisational level, at an industry level, and everything we can do, no matter how big or small, will make an impact. So I think, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. It's been fantastic having you on, and hopefully we'll be able to revisit this topic in a year's time, and we might be talking about different bits of different stats.
That would be great, wouldn't it? See an actual improvement for sure. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to NatChat, the Natilik podcast. Please subscribe to us on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. It really helps us grow the show, and we love to hear your feedback.